Hi everybody, Claudia Boleyn here and welcome to Claudia Boleyn Reviews Doctor Who. Today I am reviewing Doctor Who Series 9 Episode 4 Before the Flood by Toby Whithouse. So this episode is yet another two-parter, and I think the idea of having two-parters in Doctor Who again works really well, because often the plots that Stephen Moffat might come up with, not just Stephen Moffat, but they kind of need a little bit of time, I think, because there's so much information you need for them to make sense. And in the past, episodes which maybe could have been really great, I feel have been rushed and plot points have been glossed over and things have been forgotten and it just feels really not complete. So it does feel nice to have a 90-minute episode in order to tell the story, and I think that it works really well. For me personally, I really enjoyed this episode. I don't think it was quite as good as the first episode was, but I definitely think it was like a worthy second part to the episode, and it tied everything up and I left it feeling really satisfied. Okay, so as usual, warning alert, this review is going to contain spoilers, possibly me complaining about Stephen Moffat even though he didn't write this episode, me talking about social justice issues and feminism. Sorry guys, I am a social justice warrior and a feminist. You don't have to be either of those things to watch my reviews, but I would appreciate if you would respect my opinions and not be mean in the comment section, just like how I keep the comment section open so you can tell me what you think of the points that I raise. As always, this review will be a list of things I noticed while watching the episode. If you want a more coherent informational review, then this is not the place for that, I'm afraid. My reviews are very opinion driven and I do not represent the Whovian community as a whole. In fact, me even saying those words probably makes a lot of Whovians shudder with despair. Okay, so straight away this episode started in a really unique way, which was having the Doctor break the fourth wall like Deadpool. Not quite as violently or sexually as Deadpool does, but he basically explained to us something called the bootstrap paradox and told us to Google it, which I then did straight after the episode, and it was quite complicated. I think this works really well with Peter Capaldi's 12th Doctor because his Doctor does come across as something of a teacher or a university lecturer, that kind of thing. I thought it was nice because it felt like A, you were a companion and the Doctor was talking directly to you, which is always nice, and B, he wasn't making you feel really silly, he was just explaining something to you. I expect that was really nice for kids watching and also for like people who aren't big on sci-fi or people like me who do not understand science at all. I'm terrible at science and I need a bit of an explanation every so often for Doctor Who. So I thought for today's review I'd add something a little informational for you, just, you know, as a treat for you for sticking with me for 4 episodes. So I'm going to explain the bootstrap paradox to you as stolen from the Telegraph website because I'm bad at science and there's no way I could explain this to you properly. Okay, the bootstrap paradox. A paradox in which an object or information is created only by being sent back in time. For example, a best-selling author travels back in time to give his younger self his collected works. His younger self then publishes the work as original. Eventually he goes back in time to give them to his younger self, and so on. This means that the object or information exists in an endless time loop, with no identifiable origin. It also means that there is no free will, as every loop must exactly mirror the previous one. The name refers to the expression pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and came from Robert A. Heinlein's short story By His Bootstraps. I apologise to Robert A. Heinlein for probably mispronouncing his name. So straight away that got me thinking, and it's always nice in a Doctor Who episode to have it inspire you to do a bit of your own research. I always like to do that when we have historical episodes. I always look up the historical figure and sometimes get annoyed at the portrayal of the character. A lot of the time, actually, I'm talking about Elizabeth I. That was a tragedy, and I will never forgive Stephen Moffat for doing that. He almost made Anne Boleyn the Doctor's mother-in-law. See, now, where I'd previously longed for Anne Boleyn to show up in Doctor Who, I'm dreading it, because if Stephen Moffat's the showrunner, I'm sure we'll get an endless run of mother-in-law jokes. So this interesting story the Doctor told us about Beethoven and who wrote Beethoven's Fifth was interesting and also relevant, because when we got to the end of the episode, we thought, oh, I see, he's explaining the episode, and it made me feel a little bit weird inside, in the same way that I feel when watching A Space Odyssey 2001, because when I don't understand sciencey things, I start to feel a little bit uneasy and scared, and I don't like it. Maybe it's because I'm a bit of a control freak, but I like to know what's going on. So when things are left and I have no answers, I kind of panic a little bit. This is why science was not the lesson for me, because it just freaked me out, really. Okay, so of course I have to talk about the elephant in the room, and that's Prentice, the mole man. I think we all found out slightly more about Prentice's kinks than we cared to know. Now that is a man or a rodent that needed a good kink shaming if I ever saw one. I'm sure he'll be a meme in the Doctor Who fandom for years to come. Prentice may have been kink-shamed to death, rightfully so, by the Fisher King, but his legacy will live on in the Doctor Who fandom, disturbing us all for years to come. So this episode we had the Doctor interacting with two new companions. So we had O'Donnell and Bennett travelling with him. Now, I really like O'Donnell and Bennett. They're great characters, but there were moments in this episode where I don't know if it was just me, but did they turn into Amy and Rory? Is that just me? I felt like in some moments I was literally watching Amy and Rory who had been transferred into different bodies. Now, I might be completely wrong here, but this makes me worried and excited in equal measure, because I kind of think that writing seemed a little bit Stephen Moffat-y. That characterisation seemed a bit like the way Stephen Moffat likes to write his characters. He likes to write the sort of, like, feministy woman who wouldn't say she's a feminist, but actually she kind of bullies men quite a lot, such as dangling sexists out of windows. Not saying there's anything wrong with dangling sexists out of windows, but, you know, there was like that line in one of the episodes before where Amy's saying she was easily worth two men and all that kind of thing, and it's all very fake feminism, really. We had the bit where O'Donnell called Bennett an idiot and did, like, the other Amy and Rory type things. So I wonder if Stephen Moffat has decided he's going to somehow have the Doctor go back and save O'Donnell and pick up Bennett as well, and they're going to be the new companions for the Doctor when Clara leaves. I might be completely wrong, but it just seems like something which potentially could happen, because I feel like Bennett's story isn't finished. I just really hope if they do become the Doctor's companions that they act more like they acted in the first of their two-parter rather than the second, because at times they did go into Amy and Rory territory, and we've done that dynamic before. I may be blaming Stephen Moffat for no reason here, so I do apologise if that is the case, but it's just a little tiny theory I've got going on in my head that I thought I'd share with you. Talking of theories, there is a theory going around at the moment, one which I believe and had also picked up on, and it's quite dark. It's not necessarily a spoiler because it's not necessarily true, but you might want to like put your fingers in your ears for this part of the review. And the theory is that Clara is dying. Obviously we know that Clara is going to leave the Doctor because Jenna Coleman has said she's leaving Doctor Who, which is really sad because I like Jenna Coleman, but it will be nice to get a new companion and change it up a little bit. But there seem to be a lot of references going on with Clara about not being able to change time, about her feeling she's owed things, about her desperate to travel and her travelling with the Doctor even when maybe it's not so great for her to do so. It's like she's desperately trying to pack in as much as she can in a very small space of time. Now some people say that's just because she's grieving over Danny, and maybe that might be the case. But in the episode where Danny gets knocked down by the car, there are post-it notes all over her bookcase, and one of them says tell Danny, and I think one of them says Doctor, like as in been to the Doctor. I'm not sure, I'll check that screenshot. I might be completely wrong, just ignore that if I am. And a lot of people thought, oh, Clara must be pregnant, that's what it is, and that's what she had to tell Danny. But now people are starting to wonder, because nothing came of that, since we don't know what Clara's mum Ellie actually died of, all we know is that she died in 2005, we thought because of that, potentially she could have died in the Auton attack, but maybe she had an illness which has been passed on to Clara, and maybe Clara is dying. It would certainly explain a lot of Clara's very sort of up and down behaviour. It would certainly explain a lot of the dialogue in this episode, which I'm going to read to you because I think it sort of like feeds into the theory. So the Doctor says to Clara, "We all have to face death eventually, be it ours or someone else's," but Clara is very disturbed by this and she says, "I'm not ready yet. I don't want to think about that, not yet." The Doctor says, "I can't change what's already happened, there are rules," and then Clara is visibly very distressed and tells him, "So break them." It just felt, because of the music cue then, and the fact we were so focused on Clara's expression, that maybe there was some sort of deeper meaning to that. Certainly for those of us that have heard the theory, I think we thought, oh, maybe the theory is right, but that might just be another Whovian theory which comes to nothing. Another line the Doctor said which ties into that theory about Clara is, you can't just go back and cut off tragedy at the root, because you find yourself talking to someone you just saw dead on a slab, because then you really do see ghosts. Then in regards to seeing Prentice, who's not dead yet, he says to Bennett, "We don't tell him, understand? Not a word. We don't have that right." Which makes me wonder if maybe the Doctor already knows that there's something up with Clara. I wouldn't be surprised if he does. Now, to take the theory to an even darker place, I'm going to talk about Bennett's reaction to the Doctor, and the fact that the Doctor may well have been testing out his theory in order to save Clara by letting O'Donnell die, which is kind of dark, but I can see it happening. But he said to the Doctor, "Now you're going to do something about it because it's getting closer to you." And the Doctor seemed to really take that to heart. He seemed to feel very concerned, because we know this is a Doctor that worries about if he's a good man or not, and I think that shook him a little bit. I just wonder if, because O'Donnell and Bennett did have so much screen time this episode and interacted with the Doctor so much, if somehow the Doctor is going to come back and save O'Donnell. Maybe it's because he feels like he can't save Clara. Maybe because Clara's going to die and he can't do anything about it. He thinks he's got to save someone. He thinks of poor old Bennett, and then back he comes and we get new companions. Now, I love Bennett. I really, really do. Yes, he did act a bit Rory-ish, but then I always liked Rory, so, you know, it's all good. I thought it was very amusing when they ran from the Fisher King, and he thought that putting a wooden chair in front of the door would stop the Fisher King from getting in. Again, I also love the fact that all the supporting characters still had their own stories and motivations going on. They felt like very free characters. They weren't being pushed around in order to further the plot. Maybe O'Donnell was a tiny bit when she died, and it felt a little bit like Osgood dying again. But on the whole, you know, they all had their own motivations and they cared about each other. They still felt like a team and like real people, which was great. The use of time travel in this episode was used to really great effect. It felt kind of like The Prisoner of Azkaban a little bit. And also it reminded me of episodes like Father's Day, where there's two versions of the Doctor around and you have to try and avoid the other version. It's good to have a nice, clever time travel story, because time travel is such a huge part of Doctor Who, and a lot of the time the actual ins and outs of time travel aren't discussed, and it's really great to have that on screen. So then we had Clara, Cass and Lun, who were left on the base with the ghosts. I thought this dynamic was really pretty good. I loved the idea that Clara had fallen into the Doctor's role. Cass had then become Clara's role, so she was sort of the companion. I think it was quite scary but amusing to have Clara realise that, oh dear, the companions don't actually do as they're told. They have their own motivations and they've gone and got themselves lost. Great. The scene where Cass was being crept up on by Moran's ghost dragging the axe across the ground was one of the most frightening things. That was very, very uneasy to watch, but I think it was very clever. I liked the way she touched the floor and felt the vibrations and knew that this guy with the axe was coming. Again, as someone who's not deaf or hard of hearing, I'd need to know what you guys think of that representation and how you felt about that portrayal. But for me, watching as someone who isn't deaf or hard of hearing, it seemed really cool. I also really liked the way that, in this instance, our differences were sort of presented as a superpower almost. I think that's a very Doctor Who message. And also it reminded me of the Daredevil film, when Matt Murdock, who's a blind character, we would kind of witness how he experienced the world, and it was just amazing. Okay, so two big issues in the fandom which seem to have caused controversy and that people don't like. Number one is the sunglasses, the sonic sunglasses. I don't mind them, and I've said that before, but I was hoping that we would get a screwdriver as well. I really do hope they're not here to stay. I'm sure the next showrunner or the next Doctor will get sonic screwdriver back. I'm sure they won't all suit sunglasses. But yeah, it is sad that there's no sonic screwdriver. I don't mind the glasses, but I just think there should be a screwdriver as well. A lot of people are really, really upset about this. I mean, like, furiously angry, and I read a lot of people's thoughts on this. I mean, I would say don't take it so seriously, but then I have no right to do that. That would make me a hypocrite, because as you know, I take certain elements of Doctor Who extremely seriously. So instead, I'm going to say complain away. If you feel angry about the fact that the sonic screwdriver's gone, then it's your right to tell the world. The second thing that people thought could have been done better was the Fisher King himself. He was voiced by Peter Serafinowicz, who did the voice for Darth Maul, I found out, which is really cool. I've watched Peter Serafinowicz's sketch show, and he's a very, very funny man. And he was also in Guardians of the Galaxy, which was weird to see him in that. I don't know how he got into that, but yeah, he's a great man. And it is a shame that he wasn't in it a little bit more as the Fisher King. Some people are saying that they think the Fisher King was very scary and menacing until he appeared on the screen. Yeah, I can kind of see that. I think often monsters are more scary when you don't see them. I think it was the same with the Weeping Angels for most of us, where they were much scarier at the very start when they were first introduced in Blink, because you didn't see them move, you never really saw their true forms, so your imagination could run completely wild. And then later on, they inhabited a hotel, and one of them became the Statue of Liberty, which isn't actually made of stone. So they stopped being so scary because the mystery disappeared. And maybe that happened with the Fisher King. I personally thought the design for the Fisher King was beautiful in a really scary way. I liked it a lot, but a lot of people didn't, so I thought I would mention that. The thing with the Doctor jumping into like the casket thing to save himself, I think that we kind of guessed that ahead of time. It wasn't like a difficult leap to make, but I don't mind that kind of thing. I like to have a little theory halfway through the episode and then see it realised and feel clever for a little while, even though it's probably not that clever of me at all. I wasn't sure about the ending part with Cass and Lun getting together, because I hadn't actually seen any like romantic chemistry between them until that point. But maybe some people did see that. I don't know. I didn't personally see it. Nor did I see romantic chemistry between Bennett and O'Donnell, though, really. I just assumed all these people were like a group of friends. But, you know, good for them and all that. The ending of the episode made my head explode, again, because they were talking about the bootstrap paradox, and it actually makes me feel uncomfortable and scared, like I said before, because I don't like not knowing things, like to do with science. It really freaks me out. So, yeah, it was a really creepy but thoughtful end to the episode. So all in all, I thought it was a really good episode. It wasn't as good, in my opinion, as the first of this two-parter, but as a complete story, it tied up all the loose ends. It ended, kind of happily, but also with that element of, ooh, I want to go learn and look things up, which is always good with Doctor Who. Sincerely hope that we never have to encounter Prentice ever again. That mole has some serious issues which need to be addressed. Anyway, tell me what you thought of the episode in the comment section. As usual, I will read them all, but no being rude or nasty, because then I will have to delete your comments. And that is not me censoring your freedom of speech, that is just me trying to rid the world of your arseholery. Okay, love you loads. See you next week for the episode which features my doppelganger, apparently, according to some of you guys, Maisie Williams. Okay, see you soon. Bye-bye.